Hello. Bit of a different time this time, but it's time for us to preview, and I say us, just me, the Seattle Seahawks versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. That must win week 17 matchup for Seattle. This is an odd one because usually we'd have a live audience. We'll have to see with the change of time. I'm sorry about last night. I just fell asleep, and that's because of the holiday period. It's a bit congested. It's a bit weird. If you're in the chat, let me know. Get involved. Ask questions. Maybe we'll see some different names, some different faces. But yeah, I'll let that kind of catch up. And I'm really excited to talk about this game because there's so much on the line. It's very significant. Henry, I'm very sorry. Turns out it wasn't 1 a.m. Pacific time. I don't even know what time it is in Seattle right now. 3 a.m. I feel like that's doable. So I get up at 3 a.m. So, but yeah, no prank. Just sorry, Monjombo. Just a slight miscommunication. I mean, I can try and make it a bit more. If you are still awake in Seattle, I can try and soothe you to sleep. Although I don't know if my voice is that type of voice. Maybe if Griff was here, I feel like Griff would be better. That sort of thing. Devo, good morning. 4 a.m. in New Mexico. Nice. There we go. Yeah, I thought I could catch certain American time zones. Well, I hope you have whatever you do to get ready in the morning. I would have a very strong coffee. I hope you, Devo, you are able to get that. Good to see you. Right. Let's get this thing started. Bang. Welcome to the Seattle Overload podcast, where it's time to preview week 17. The Seattle Seahawks host the Pittsburgh Steelers in the point of the season where it's a must-win game for both sides. Seattle 8-7, currently with the 7th seed. If they lose this game, they would need the Vikings and the Packers to lose at least one of their 2 remaining games. And given the Vikings and the Packers play each other this Sunday Night Football, there's very slim chances of that happening. Basically, win this game, take care of your own business. You've earned the right to control your own destiny. You've been helped out by other teams. Take care of business. Pete Carroll describing it as a championship matchup. The Steelers themselves are 8-7. They're 9th place in the AFC, but they're really vying for, a playoff spot themselves. Seattle's 3.5 point favorites in this game, but while historically Seattle has the edge, with Pittsburgh not winning in Seattle since 1983, and the Seahawks 7-1 at home to the Steelers, despite the actual series between the two sides being 10-10. Seattle has that kind of home advantage, and I don't know how much to read into that. Obviously, East Coast to West Coast, there's quite the journey. Pittsburgh, especially in that kind of conference where they don't really have to travel too much. I know this game's being played 20 in that kind of 20 minutes earlier kickoff schedule, probably to help them out slightly. But Pittsburgh's only worst road record historically is at the Chicago Bears. Now, in terms of the two teams, how they match up overall, similar records. You can look at it from a basic standpoint, or you can do what we've been doing in this preview series where we can look at total points, which is Sports Info Solutions is propriety metric, and it's a pretty useful way of assessing value of each team, of assessing the value of plays. There's some similarities to EPA per play. Let me just share my screen. Bang. So these two teams aren't actually that dissimilar. Seattle comes in 12, where they've been hovering around 12 in total points per play. The Steelers are actually 16th, so kind of matches. But where the Steelers kind of differ from Seattle is while Seattle's offense in total points per 60 is 11th, Pittsburgh's is 22nd. But Pittsburgh is kind of building themselves on defense, as has happened in previous years. They're 12th in defense total points. Seattle comes in 17th. We'll talk about all of these things, all these significant things. And then special teams wise, Seattle 16th. The Steelers slightly worse off, 22nd. Now, where I think this matchup's going to be won and lost for Seattle is when it comes to the Seahawks offense playing against the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. Specifically, the Seahawks playing against the Pittsburgh Steelers off defensive line. Seattle's offensive line, the two tackles really did struggle versus the Tennessee Titans, and that Titans pass rush wasn't really bigged up to be, a significantly dominant unit, whereas Pittsburgh obviously has the NFL sack leader in TJ Watt. TJ Watt has 17 sacks on the season. He also leads the NFL in quarterback hits with 33, and he has a 16.9% pressure percentage, which is really, really solid. That's per Sports Info Solutions. That's just behind NFL leader if you filter it by 400 pressures or more, Aiden Hutchinson, who has 17.8%. But Watt is ahead of Nick Bosa in pressure percentage too. And he's complemented by Alex Highsmith, who on the opposite edge, he has 7 sacks and also a 12.9% pressure percentage. So they kind of are built up front. They've always been a menace up front. I mean, if you think about how Seattle's interior has struggled, interior-wise, Seattle, they've had some shuffling going on, but Anthony Bradford is the 4th-round pick. You kind of worry what he looks against the veteran Cam Hayward, and even 2nd-round pick Keanu Benton. He's just kind of a athletic size, power, strength problem. It's going to be tough. And this Seahawks offense, when they can pass protect for Geno Smith, as we saw in the tape, it's really, really tough. Christopher, good to see you in here. I didn't think, Christopher, we'd get you, but there you go. Right. So Seahawks injury report-wise, when it comes to the offensive line, there's some significant news. Anthony Bradford was a limited participant in Wednesday and Thursday practice, the starting right guard, with a elbow injury. He was then a full participant in Friday practice. He did split time with Jason Peters after the offensive line versus the Eagles played. The starting 5, so Bradford, Lewis, Damian Lewis, Evan Brown, Abraham Lucas, Charles Cross, after they played 100% of the snaps. In Tennessee, Peters kind of spotted in a bit for Bradford. I think he took 14 snaps on the offense at the right guard spot. So maybe Bradford had been dealing with this elbow thing. Maybe he got a bit hurt in Tennessee. We'll never know. But the significant news is Bradford, while he was able to participate fully on Friday, not great that he's limited on Wednesday and Thursday in terms of preparing for this Pittsburgh front. The significant news is Jason Peters is a non-participant all through practice with a foot injury. He's ruled out for the game on Sunday. That leaves Seattle in terms of if Anthony Bradford does get hurt or is unable to continue in a game against the Steelers, that leaves Seattle in a bit of a spot, doesn't it? In terms of who would fill in for their backup right guard, who would come in, you could play Evan Brown at right guard. He obviously has experience at the guard spots, the center. But do you really want to change your starting center round in this must-win matchup? Probably not, right? So what you could do, and I don't know when the Seahawks have to elevate it, have to announce the elevation, but you could elevate Jake Curhan. Jake Curhan could get elevated from the practice squad to play right guard. He obviously has experience there. Shiv, great to see you. Shiv, this isn't degenerate from me though. This is normal. This is for me at 11:15 a.m. I'm recording this. This is I've got my whole day ahead of me for once. But yeah, thank you, Shiv. Good to see you. So I really do. It's understandable, I think, to have concern about. Well, we'll talk about how Pittsburgh's secondary, their linebackers are banged up. They're pretty weak. I mean, their defensive front is just going to be. It just seems hellish, and I don't know. There's just so much inconsistent with how Seattle pass protects. I don't know how. It seems a bit scary. Even Marcus Golden. Marcus Golden was always that annoying player in Arizona who always got after Seattle in annoying ways. So what we will probably see from the Seahawks is kind of similar to how Shane Waldron responded against the Titans. He kind of got into more kind of quick passes, some screen plays, tried to run the ball a bit more. And although they were very inefficient running the football, they had that series conversion rate that we looked at where they, I think, were 95th percentile converting series, which started with a run. So the run kind of nullified pass rush, helped out the offensive line a bit. And also, their receivers kind of took over in the end. That being said, as I've said, this Pittsburgh D-line, defensive front, is a problem. Now, in terms of the rest of Pittsburgh, it is crazy. Now, you're not misreading this. Well, is that correct? That can't be correct. Oh, yes, it is. So Jalen Smith, right? Jalen Smith and where's Miles Jack on here? Miles Jack. Those were the two inside backers, I believe, who Miles Jack was they just signed Jalen Smith, right? And Miles Jack was brought up because they've got a whole host of issues at inside backer. Elandon Roberts out for the year, and it's just a complete mess in their inside backer room. And then going towards the secondary as well, at corner, they've got some promise. I mean, Joey Porter Jr., the high draft pick this year, the rookie, playing for his dad's team. He's so long, he's so physical, and I think he'll probably match up with DK Metcalf, given Metcalf's size. And I mean, Porter coming out, his real issue was he was very, very grabby. Maybe he'll grab Metcalf, but Metcalf likes to give it out too. So they're just going to be going at it, taking chunks out of each other. And that will be something to really look forward to, just seeing that play out. And then opposite him, Levi Wallace, I always thought was okay in Buffalo, like fairly solid. He's kind of long, but he's lighter, 180-pound dude. But in terms of his press technique, he's pretty polished. But safety is crazy. So Minka Fitzpatrick, as you can see here, out with a knee injury. Trenton Thompson out with a neck injury. DeMonte Kazee was banned for the year, I believe. Yep, suspended for the year after another dangerous hit. So what they did last week against the Cincinnati Bengals is Patrick Peterson, NFL veteran, he filled in as the corner, filled in as a safety, and that's kind of interesting. And then they also signed Eric Rowe, basically off the street to play there because, I mean, if you look at this R-Lads depth chart, they'd have it as Miles Kilbrew and Elijah Riley. I mean, I've heard of Kilbrew, Riley. So I imagine we'll see Eric Rowe, the longtime NFL vet, and Peterson back there. But that's very, very patchwork, incredibly patchwork. So essentially what we're saying is, in theory at least, and it's remarkable that the Steelers come in as the 10th pass coverage team in total points. But really it's a case of if you can pass block, if you can protect for Geno Smith, then and you can not get into bad situations where you're in your clear passing downs, you're in your third and longs, you're allowing them to tee off against you, then it should be okay. But the problems are going to arise if they're not able to do that. This defensive front it just is a scary, scary matchup for Seattle. And it's an opportunity for the offensive line to prove themselves. Shiv, that's a very good question. Shiv, I will remember this question and then I will explore that later, okay? Like, we'll try and get to that next... Maybe next Tuesday. Yeah. Yeah, Shiv, I'll do it next Tuesday. But Shiv, I'd say that they've been sprinkling in more gap run concepts the Seahawks have than before. But that's anecdotal. I'll actually come at that with evidence as well. They definitely need to find kind of a run concept that fits them. Now, the Steelers also have a +10 turnover differential, which, I mean, that feels very Seattle-y, but you could also say that's Mike Tomlin-y, which is the best in the NFL. And while these DBs, you can say what you want about them, maybe you don't feel so positive about them, etc., etc., they are benefiting from how the Steelers pressure, how the Steelers play tight pressure coverages, play tight man-to-man. Seattle's had real issues against teams who play man-to-man, haven't they? But I think this game, I kind of view it as similar to that Dallas Cowboys game where Seahawks go on the road in Dallas, and while they don't come out of the result, and let me go to the media guide here on when it comes to results, because the Steelers have a remarkable record in one-score games. But while Seattle didn't win against Dallas, what they were able to do was, Geno Smith got pressured to high hell. Next Gen Stats had it over 50%, didn't they? But he threw it in a record time since Next Gen Stats started recording it for Geno. Obviously, it's only a small sample size, but I imagine it's a record time for his career. The ball was coming out so fast. And more than that, Seattle came into this matchup with their best route concepts for their receivers. They actually had really good execution, most important, but also, almost as important, really good stack concepts and rub routes designed to separate against man-to-man. Now, last week, we're watching against the Titans. They get man-to-man, and Seattle runs basically Hank, curl flat, out of trips against man-to-man. And, Jake Bobo almost catches the pass, but it's more kind of iso ball-y, win your one-on-one type concept, rather than let's generate some separation here. Let's make this man coverage assignment a bit harder to cover. They did run that out of a trips bunch look, so kind of tight spacing for the man coverage, but not in a way that they did against Dallas, where there was some really clever picks and rubs and that whatnot. And this is something that, you hope is more like the Dallas game, where they're able to kind of replicate that, lean on that. If they want to win in the playoffs, for instance, or even make the playoffs, but if they want to win in the playoffs, they need to be able to kind of replicate more the Dallas usage of receivers and deployment of the receivers. On top of that, let me find this one score thing. Yes. So Pittsburgh's won 7 of their 9 games decided by 1 scores in 2023. So while Seattle has been playing it tight, Pittsburgh's been playing games tight too this year and winning. So I would suggest, and they're also pretty good historically in 1-score games too. Since 2021, the Steelers have the second most victories in 1-score games also. So that's very scary. And it's kind of like this defense really, it looks, it does help when you have TJ Watt, but it does look like they're playing greater than some of their parts. It really does. So it's just an opportunity for Seattle to prove Dallas wasn't a flash in the pan. And, the team schematically, there's obviously differences, but ultimately I'd say the Steelers have lesser second and third level talent than Dallas did. And they're more banged up. Now, on the other side of the football, you can't really read too much into the Steelers passing, total points being 25th ranking in the NFL. That is because Kenny Pickett, who he's kind of been soft benched, hasn't he? Because, there's this ankle injury and he's questionable with it for the game. But call it what it is. He's been benched for Mason Rudolph, which with how Mason Rudolph played against the Cincinnati Bengals, we're talking 290 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 0 interceptions, with yards per attempt over 10. You're getting storylines like, oh, hang on a second. Mason Rudolph, the quarterback for the Steelers, he is playing against Geno Smith. Could Mason Rudolph be the next Geno Smith? Obviously, 3rd round pick of the Steelers in 2018. He has a big arm. He connected really well with George Pickens. I mean, you talk about 10 yards per attempt, but Pickens had 4 catches for 195 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns, including taking a slant pattern for 80 plus yards. So that is a large degree of Rudolph's production and kind of his explosive numbers overall. Pickens had 6 targets as well. It was a really, really big topic, Pickens' lack of effort in run blocking, but he kind of just proved that he's too good, whether he doesn't put in effort on certain plays or not. He's too good not to get the football to. He is a kind of terrifying player for the Seahawks to have to face. And what we may see is a similar thing to the last 2 weeks. Now, Seattle's they haven't changed their coverage, but Pete Carroll described it as a couple of adjustments basically to their game plan, where when they're faced up with DeAndre Hopkins, when they're faced up with AJ Brown, Seattle, a bit more too high presentation at the snap, a bit less static defense, if you want to use that. It's quite a trendy word to use, isn't it? And what that ended up seeing was they hold DeAndre Hopkins to 20 receiving yards. And the previous week, when they kind of initiated this, it's not I don't want to call it a switch. Well, it is kind of a switch. When they initiated this kind of a shift, right? They did it for AJ Brown and the Eagles because of how dangerous AJ Brown was. Well, if you want to look at AJ Brown's stats against the Seahawks, he was held to 5 catches for 56 yards and 0 touchdowns. So back-to-back weeks, they nullified them. Make sure you check out the tape of last week is Saturday. This past week's tape example, we kind of looked at the kind of adjustments, but they definitely have tools to handle, or not handle, but slow down George Pickens. But ultimately, it's going to be a pretty big test for the Seahawks. And when we look at the injuries, not that Jamal Adams would have been matching up with Pickens, but he plays a bit of nickel. He plays a bit of strong safety. Hey, if they put Pickens as the slot, the number 3 receiver, Adams might have had to carry him deep like he messed up against Deebo Samuel that time. But Adams, after returning to practice, is limited participant with that knee injury. He tried it in Wednesday and Thursday practice. He didn't participate on Friday, and he'd been ruled out for the game. But the really encouraging news when it comes to the defense is that Devon Witherspoon is officially questionable. That is huge. And Greg Bell of the Tacoma News Tribune, his view of the situation after seeing Witherspoon live at practice, the 5th overall selection, the nickel corner sensation, is that he will play. He's officially questionable, limited participant in Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday's practice. He's dealing with that hip pointer injury, described as the dreaded legitimate by Pete Carroll. But if he can play, it's massive. He's such a dynamic playmaker for Seattle. Trey Brown's done okay as the left corner, but against Pickens, you kind of need that ultra competitive mindset. Not saying that Brown doesn't have that, but Spoon's just, I think we can all agree, is kind of on a different level and is probably a better cover corner. I also think the way he plays corner is more likely to cause Pickens some problems. Not only that, he gives you that really dynamic nickel option inside. And while Artie Burns has played, admirably okay as the nickel, Spoon's a different level. I think what you also may see is with Spoon listed as questionable, if he is suiting up for this game, you might see him on a bit of a pitch count to keep him, even though it's a must-win game. Seattle hasn't been afraid to kind of exercise load management with their players, and we may see that with Spoon so that they're not completely rushing him back into it, or we may not. I don't know how a hit pointer shakes out there compared to other kind of factors. Now, why Spoon is also important is because linebacker Jordan Brooks is questionable for this game with the ankle sprain that he kind of re-injured. Was his the medial ankle sprain? I can't remember what the location was, but he re-injured it against the Titans. And what if Brooks is, he doesn't participate on Wednesday, doesn't participate on Thursday, and then he's limited participant on Friday with that, trying to test it out. If Brooks can't go, or even if he goes, but with that, dealing with this injury, Seattle's second level and third level, as was brutally exposed in that second 49ers matchup, they lack so much speed. Like there's a real kind of lack of team speed, which I mean, you have Reek Woolen, right? You do have him. But in terms of like down the center of the defense, or just even on like the overhang positions, like the apex positions, like where a nickel would play or a strong safety at times, they're lacking speed. Julian Love's played solid football, hasn't he? But again, he's not the fastest player. They need Spoon coming back in if he's able to. It just brings a kind of different dimension that is needed. Obviously, Bobby Wagner, another really successful season in terms of like tackle numbers and all that, but he's visibly slowed down, as we've covered ad nauseum, as everyone's kind of pointed out. It's very obvious. But yeah, so we'll see what happens with Brooks, but Spoon back would be significant. And I can't believe and then in terms of the Steelers run game, they seem like they can do a bit of everything in terms of their run game concepts. And it's crazy to me that after the Seahawks defense started so well, remember at the start of the season, I said boldly that the Seahawks would have a top 5 run defense. And it looked like at the start of the season, they might actually do that. And remember, that is a very bold prediction, given how bad the run defense was last year. That it was bordering on a hot take, but it was a take informed by the Seahawks. It looked like they'd improved their run D. It looked like they'd clearly made some changes to the techniques they were using up front, just the way that they'd structured their defense. It felt more logical. It felt more in sync. It felt like the second level was playing more kind of in tune with the first level. It looked like it was all cleaned up for them. And they did start really well. They were looking like a top 5 run defense. And I can't remember what week it was, but, first it was like the quarterback run game, softly exposing it. The Browns had some success. And now they've plummeted in total points to the 30th run defense. And it's bad again. And obviously, you can't talk about this without mentioning the loss of Uchenna Nwosu, who was a very, very significant player for their run D. And there's a knock-on effect to him going out as well, something Griffith spoke about a lot. Ultimately, the Frank Clark thing is weird as well. He is officially ruled, he's not got a game status listed here, but I know he was officially ruled as, it sounds like he's not going to play. So I don't know what's going on there with him, but he was brought in to kind of not replace Nwosu, but be the extra depth needed with Nwosu out. It's very weird that what's going on with Frank Clark right now. But what they have tried to do is put Draymond Jones on the edge and be that kind of bigger edge type for them, opposite of Boye Mafe, who's doing okay as a run defender. But yeah, the move of Draymond Jones to be the bigger edge, that has helped, but it's only so much. Now, in terms of the run defense, also Mario Edwards, non-participant all through practice with a knee injury. He's actually been sneaky effective, kind of getting after it as like an interior defensive tackle, playing like the 1 tech and the 3 tech for the Seahawks. Well, actually, he plays a bit of 2i, but irrelevant. It is a bit of a loss. What will happen there is they'll put Miles Adams in. Miles Adams will have to fill in as the kind of plug and play defensive tackle to spot Leonard Williams, to spot Jaron Reed. And I just think the Steelers are kind of a grind it out team. So it's just going to be a messy game. And I don't see how it's not a close one. I know Seattle's favored by 3.5 points, as I said, but yeah. Christopher, the Frank Clark absence is suspicious, secret injury, or is he cooked? Yeah. And Ganos saying Clark is benched. Pete Carroll said yesterday he was grumpy about the question. Seems pretty obvious to me. It's weird. So let's talk about 2 events, right? When it comes to Frank Clark. So the first event is Geno Smith gets injured, right? Geno Smith gets injured and hurts his groin and misses the 49ers game and misses the Eagles game. And how it happens is he stumbles over an unnamed defensive player. Sounds like his legs kind of got caught up. Maybe it was a play action bootleg rollout or something, etc., etc. Could that have been Frank Clark? We don't know. Pete Carroll didn't make a big deal about it, but the quarterback is redshirted for a reason. We don't know how it happened. That could be that's just one, you could connect dots there. Feels a bit less likely, but there's definitely something going on there. And so the other game I go to is Dallas Cowboys road game. Okay. The Dallas Cowboys road game. Have I got this right? Let me just double check this, chat. No, it was the 49ers game, okay? Frank Clark decided not to travel for the San Francisco 49ers road game. Now, why would that be? Seattle in that game planned to play a bit more base defense being not what they use the most, so it's misleading, but 3-4 defense, where why that matters is both edge players are expected to be able to pass drop into coverage. Okay? Now, Frank Clark, pass coverage-wise, even though he's slimmed down a fair bit, he cannot pass drop as well as Derek Hall or Boye Mafe. Darrell Taylor has experience pass dropping, even though you don't really like it, but he does have experience doing it. Remember, he was the Sam outside linebacker when he first came on the scene in Seattle, and Clint Hurt was looking for a way to get him on the field. He worked a bit as the Sam, and they were playing bare fronts, which again, both edges have to be able to drop, especially if you're Darrell Taylor and you're lighter and you're slimmer and you're not called Carlos Dunlap. So, possibly Frank Clark was told, along with the fact that Pete Carroll said, hey, we want to get Derek Hall more playing time, we should make that happen. Possibly Frank Clark was told, you're not going to play as much this game. And he was like, well, fine. Or you're going to be inactive for the 49ers game because we need Hall active over you for the pass coverage. And so he was like, I'm not going to travel. But since that point, it's been super weird. Now, why has it been super weird? Well, the 49ers road game was week 15, yes? So week 16, after not traveling for the 49ers game, Frank Clark doesn't appear on the Seahawks injury report. But in terms of the snap counts, and I'm just getting them up so I can actually be logical. I didn't expect to be delving into Frank Clark in this much detail, but it's a kind of a fascinating story. In terms of the snap counts, though, in that game, he is an inactive player. So he's inactive. Wait, hang on. I've got this wrong. I've got my weeks wrong. Brilliant. When did the Seahawks travel to the 49ers? Week 14. So week 15 of practice after the 49ers game, which Frank Clark decides not to travel for. He doesn't appear on the injury report. But if you go to week 15, when the Seahawks play against the Philadelphia Eagles, and of course, there's all sorts of other personnel changes going on here, isn't there? Because they have Mike Jackson come in for Reek Woolen. They have Jamal Adams kind of shut down a bit. Like, let's get you properly healthy. Let's not do what we've been doing. And Frank Clark plays 7 snaps, 10%, but he's out-snapped 3 times by Derek Hall. He plays 10 snaps, 14% of the snaps. Then after that game, maybe there's beef, maybe there isn't. But he doesn't appear on the week 16 injury report, but I don't know why he's not on here. He definitely had an illness. And then week 17, which is obviously this coming week, He's resting, right? He's resting after that Titans game. And yet the Titans game, he took 0 snaps. So what's he resting from? Then a non-participant on Wednesday, non-participant on Thursday, non-participant on Friday, and ruled out for the game. So there's obviously something behind the scenes which has gone on there. Or he's getting ready for his famous playoff record where, isn't he like the third? In theory, this playoffs, he could become the all-time playoff sack leader. Maybe he's eating right for the playoffs, but yeah, something going on there. So they'll be disappointed with that. And then Ken, the last player really to talk about when it comes to the injury report, and it kind of ties in again to how Seattle needs to kind of run the ball more effectively. If you look at their rushing total points, they're 15th. They're actually better than their passing total points, where they're 16th. But what you could say is in recent weeks, their passing offense has somewhat improved, whereas their rushing offense seems to be regressing. They're missing those crucial blocks. Like the one block you need to spring a run often kind of gets missed. But the significant news in terms of the run offense is Ken Walker. He'd been dealing with a shoulder illness. He was held out of Wednesday, Thursday practice, and then he's a limited participant on Friday. So we'll have to see how that shakes out. Walker's kind of been banged up for a lot of the year. I mean, he is a running back. I think that shoulder first cropped up in last week's injury report. Carroll in the press conference, he wasn't very clear on whether Walker would play or not. He didn't know, and that's hence why he said questionable. So we'll have to see how that all goes. I mean, so if not Walker, then Charbonnet. But I think the real issue, Walker does get a bit overly creative at times when it comes to runs, but I think the real issue has been the blocking. And it kind of it exacerbates Walker's overly creative nature sometimes, because if you're not getting the reliable hole that you're told is there, then you might try and create elsewhere or just stay alive. And I mean, some of his best runs against the Titans were from some remarkable stuff, from like almost individual creativity, making stuff happen, which, most running backs wouldn't be able to do. Yeah. So Jonathan asked, hey, do you think there's any chance we keep Diggs or Jamal Adams? Jonathan, I've been asked this before, but I mean, Jamal Adams, it just seems very difficult to justify given the current context. We'll have to see how that all shakes out. But I mean, it's just a tough one where with what he's due to earn next year compared to what you've got out of him, and then, whether he can even get back to what he was in terms of his injury. And that's been a question mark throughout the year, to the point where we're at now. It just doesn't seem likely. But Quandre Diggs, absolutely, there's a chance. He's still a very good post safety. He had a very good game against Tennessee, actually, just an unfortunate unnecessary roughness penalty where it was a close one. But he's still playing at a pretty high level, I'd say, Diggs. So yeah, I know there's been consternation from the fan base, but you kind of, for that to work, as a safety, you need other players to step up. Now, is there anything else you want to know, chat? Let's just check. So that's an interesting one. That Alex Highsmith is the fifth highest linebacker in total points with 40 in the league. TJ Watt obviously leads all edges in total points. And oh yeah, well, we haven't talked about Jaylen Warren. That's the type of running back who scares me, getting matched up with like a Bobby Wagner. Obviously, it's not the same level as Christian McCaffrey in terms of the play calling, the kind of the structure of the offense, but also the player. But Warren fourth in running back total points. And I know also if he's here, 1 second, let me bring up. I know also that Warren has been very elusive this season. Like incredibly elusive. Let me just bring that up. And like I say, like this is all Sports Info Solution stuff. You can get this. I forget how I got it emailed to me, but it's very useful for just diving into certain teams. So, yeah, broken and missed tackle percentage. Jalen Warren leads all running backs in the league at 22%. See, Kenneth Walker's actually third place with 19% of his touches resulting in broken or missed tackles. Warren also leads the league in broken tackle percentage with 17%. So there's some kind of sneaky skill position talent for the Steelers, and I also think they're depressed footballer. I just talked about Mario Edwards, and Jonathan. We talked about Witherspoon a bit earlier. Yeah, so I don't know. It would be a very disappointing game for the Seahawks to lose. It would essentially end their season. It's the type of game that if they lose it, they have kind of no excuses. They can have no complaints. At the same time, it's obviously going to be a disappointing one because it would basically knock them out. But it's a bit of a scary matchup for Seattle, I'd say. And this yeah, so let's see if SIS has anything else on. Okay, so that's interesting. I mean, it makes sense, but obviously Kenny Pickett's been benched. But usage-wise for George Pickens is still fairly similar. Pickens with 9 20-plus yard receptions, which ties 12th in the league, and 21 deep targets. I think that's only going to go up with Mason Rudolph as the quarterback. 21 deep targets ties 13th. Also a reliable catcher, catching 9 of his 10 deep receiving targets. That's a good question, Depressed Footballer. Did the Seahawks go more 3-down fronts as the Titans game went further? Not really. No. The one thing they did do was they started just playing, I mentioned how they'll play like 2 high presentation at the snap and then rotate down. What they, which is kind of designed to halt the passing game and, help out with DeAndre Hopkins, change the picture of the snap, impact the kind of quick or relatively quick hitting intermediate play action where it's a quick play fake and then banged into a dig route. What they did do is just start playing a dude down in the box and just play an 8-man front, as in 8 guys in the box. But 3-down fronts, Seattle only plays base when teams come out in 13 personnel. What they'll do if teams are in 12, or like the Titans, they have 6 offensive line packages. What the Seahawks will do in those instances is they'll play big nickel, which had been Jamal Adams. That past game, it was Devin Bush. And that brings me very nicely onto, this is Devin Bush's chance for revenge, isn't it? This is Devin Bush's revenge game. So hopefully he can get it done. Now, whether he's playing the weak side inside backer role, which, is to be decided, isn't it? We'll have to see. Given Jordan Brooks did practice on Friday and he's officially questionable for the game. or whether he's playing the big nickel role, which against the Steelers offense, let's find out about them. Brilliant. 1 second. But we'll have to see how Bush gets on. I mean, in that past Titans game, we saw some really interesting stuff from Bush where in coverage, he looked very, very interesting, like really good movement skills, really good kind of ability to fill routes in behind his zone and kind of merge underneath them. He looked nice. In terms of the what? I'm trying to log in. In terms of the run fit stuff, he looked like a guy who'd been preparing to play the big nickel role and then got thrust into the weak side inside backer role and had kind of a limited preparation there. There was a few, like, it looked like he was lining up a bit too tight at times, like we're talking width wise. If they're like stunting, then a line wider so you can get over the top of that. A few kind of subtle things like that where, if he'd had a full week preparing more for the weak side inside backer role, which by the way, he wouldn't have prepared for, I don't think, too often. Oh dear. I'm trying to get into my account, but I'm having issues to find what the Steelers are in terms of their personnel usage. But yeah, I really feel positive about the Seahawks' ability to actually get down, move the football, stop the Steelers moving the football with Bush in the lineup. I think he's a pretty solid player, which is a pleasant surprise because obviously we've spoke so much about Cody Barton on this podcast. I think if Seattle absolutely had to stop the run, just return as that 3 defensive line thing, I think they would go back into base. Right, here we go. So you can see here, we're not going to see base. So again, depressed footballer, your question on Mario Edwards is a good one because if they use 11 personnel 74% of the time, this is a nickel game for Seattle, and it's why Witherspoon is such an important player for them. This tells the picture of how kind of diverse their attack is in terms of. Well, that doesn't actually. I'm chatting nonsense. So apparently they're a 67% zone run team, 28% gap, and also a 71% usage of shotgun. So what I would say, Seattle's defensive game plan is most likely to look like a kind of similar thing to what they used against the Cincinnati Bengals, I'd suggest. With maybe a bit of a look at how they played the Eagles too. Remember, they're a shotgun heavy team. Really, I mean, these numbers look suited for Seattle to have an okay day on defense. And the Rudolph factor is just such a weird one. Like if it was Pickett, I'd be much more confident, but you just, even if Rudolph, like, long term isn't an answer as a quarterback, just the fact he played so promisingly and didn't make any mistakes, but also was able to get the ball into the hands of Pickens. That is slightly troubling. And then it's very similar to what we about the Steelers, but they're fairly diverse in their packages. But it's going to be a lot of kind of odd front, fire zone stuff. I mean, in theory, if Geno is as good as he sometimes is at the line of scrimmage, as good as he is at his best at kind of identifying things, reading things out, we're going to get some really quick kind of pressure beating throws from Geno. And you'll see here as well, this is an interesting thing for me. The Steelers, when they play nickel, this grouping, they suck. But they've been a pretty solid nickel team. And they also use a fair bit of dime. 16% of their snaps in dime. So maybe it's the type of game for the Seahawks to, again, this is going to be interesting seeing how they play around with their usage of 11 personnel. It is noteworthy from a Seattle perspective that Noah Fant was a full participant in Thursday and Friday practice after not participating on Wednesday with a knee issue. So it's the perfect game for the Seahawks. It's the chance for them to, like I said, lean on what they did well against the Cowboys in terms of beating intense pressure, really talented front, tight coverage, potentially some dropping out, some disguise. Run a very similar game plan to the Dallas Cowboys game with also the results. Of course, the results help, don't they? That's very easy. And then on defense, it's a chance for them to, stop messing around, still eliminate the explosive plays like they've been doing good at, but make Mason Rudolph make mistakes, make him regress into the guy who, wasn't a starting quarterback, and prove that you belong in the playoffs. That's what these last 2 weeks are about. If you can't beat the 8-7 Pittsburgh Steelers and then the Arizona Cardinals, then you don't deserve to be in the playoffs anyway. And I think if Seattle wins these 2 games, suddenly we'll be thinking about, well, hang on, they played close against the good teams-ish, other than the 49ers buzzsaw. That 49ers road game, there was a bad mistake from Jamal Adams. It went pretty badly. Geno Smith wasn't there. The Eagles, they beat. The Cowboys, there's very close shootout. They've beat the Lions. And you can see the cope into, right now, they'd be projected to play the Philadelphia Eagles. Or they might play the Lions. So, yeah. Depressed footballer. What caused so many of their pass pro issues versus the Tennessee Titans? Well, kind of similar to the season, but guys losing their one-on-one matchups, guys having struggles handling interior twists, long downs and distances. So the ball has to be held to get the guys open down the field. But it was the Titans game was more guys just getting absolutely bullied one-on-one. And this is a massive game for Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas to respond. It really is. So thank you, everyone, for joining live. We've had some great numbers in here, given the time. Lots of early risers. This is not me, usually. Normal service will resume next week. Let me know in the comments down below what you like. What I like the sound of, I think, is possibly Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I think that's the best way to do things, isn't it? But it's been a bit of a truncated week for me this past week. Hence, we're doing a Saturday thing because I had to sleep. But I hope you all had a great Christmas. Have a great New Year when it comes. We'll be live on New Year's Eve / New Year's Day for me with a post-game recap, reaction of the Seahawks hosting the Pittsburgh Steelers in Week 17, where hopefully we're talking about a 3rd straight win for the Seahawks and them being on the verge of the playoffs. And we can all watch Sunday Night Football rooting for a tie. Please do like the video, comment down below, subscribe to the channel, follow me at Matty F. Brown. It is a podcast, so if you just go on your podcast app, subscribe, hit 5-star review, that does help us. Until next time, have a good rest of your day.